lesson, it's going to be completely in the console of the browser. I'm just going to go over the basics of JavaScript data types. There's a few of them, and I'm going to go over just really the basics, just so you can get started. The first one will be numbers. The type of these numbers are both a number, but there is an int and a float that I would like to go over. So to do this, I'm going to create a var in here, and I'm going to call this Brandon, after myself. And I'm going to do it 10. Now, if I go in here, and I say 10, it gives me a 10, and you can see that it's right in here. Now, if I go over here and do a type of Brandon, you can see that it's a number. Now, the other thing I can do is I can parse this as a float. So I can do a parse float of Brandon. And you can see I get the same thing. Now, what if I have a decimal? Now, let's say I said Brandon equal to that. Now, what if I want to get a round number and I want to convert it to an integer? I can just do a parse int of Brandon, and that's going to be a 10 because that's the nearest integer value. An integer value is just a number of 0, 1, 2, 3. They don't include decimals. They can also be negative. Now, a float could have a decimal. So if you're doing anything that has to be super precise, floats are your friend. Ints are like a little bit easier to deal with for certain things, and they're quicker. They're a lot faster. It takes a lot less memory. So you should use ints when needed. Like let's say you have a counter or something, ints are a perfect thing. If you're dealing with maybe prices or something, then a float's going to work well because you need the decimal point. Now the next thing would be a string. Now let's say I set Brandon equal to test. Now that equals a string, so I can do a little type of Brandon, and you can see it becomes a string. Now, a string is actually an array of chars or characters that are all together. So that brings me into the next point of what an array is and what that is. So let's say you set Brandon, I'm going to reset this to be this, and now I'm going to do type of, oops, my bad. It's an object. I actually get these confused sometimes. Well, so an array, I guess, is a type of object, but we have two different things. Brandon would be like this. The object would look like this, and the array was like this. So I actually was right. Now, the way you would customize an object and an array is you do it like this. And let's set this back to an array by doing. Now, if I want to put values into the array, I'm just going to do like 1, 2, 3. Now you can see that if I go in here, I can now actually access each one of these. So if I access the 0th one, it's going to return a 1. Now if I do a 2, that's going to return 3. And so on. An array will allow you to put multiple elements in there. Now an object, what this will allow you to do So let's set this back to being an object. An object will make it so you can do like a dot, whatever. And they're both good for different things. You can actually put an array inside of an object inside of an array, and you can go back and forth, and really whatever works best for you. Now, you'll get into more of this as you go into the future, but different things that these object arrays are used for is, let's say you're using jQuery to make a selection. Now, let's say I want to select everything within the nav bar. So I'm going to do .nav and then get all the LIs. So if I use jQuery to do .nav li, you can see that it actually returns an array. So if I did I'm going to do var selection equals what we just typed out, and now if I go over to selection, you can see that that does the same thing. Now where this is valuable is, now let's say I want to just select the first one. I can do that. I want to select the second one, and so on. So that really makes it so you can customize and get different things how you want them, make more broad selections, and it's really important. Now, going back to strings versus strings versus numbers. Let's say you have a number that's within a text document. A lot of times this happens when you're trying to add numbers you find in the DOM. So let's say you read it, and now when you read it, it's going to be read something like this. And the whole thing with this is that when I put this in quotes, you're reading a string. It doesn't know if it's a number. It doesn't know it's a word. It's just going to read it as a string no matter what. So we're going to have to parse this. Now, if we don't parse it, we'll get an error. Now, the error is going to happen when you do something with addition. So let's say I do Brandon plus 10. Now, this should return 20, but look what's going to happen. You're going to get a string where it's concatenating this plus the number 10. Now, the way to really do this is, let's go over to set this back to a string. Now what we want to do is we want to make this equal to an int. And now when I call Brandon, you can see that it's now an integer value. So now if I go over here and do Brandon plus 10, we actually get our 20. So this is going to be really important because you will see it causing some errors down the line. Anyway, this is really just the basics. I hope it answers some questions about how data types work. I know I didn't go too deep, and arrays could be fairly tricky. Objects can be even trickier. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and hopefully I'll cover them in future videos as well. Talk to you soon. Bye.